Okay, good morning again. Okay, so I was saying before we started that how much this means to me, and I'm just really glad you're here um, because I wouldn't learn this stuff. I just think Ignatius has so much to offer us, and the one thing that it needs for us to do, or I need to do, is to shift. This whole thing is about the good spirit and the bad spirit, and um, I'm trying to change that to human nature versus spiritual nature. And when I'm living under the tyranny of my human nature, which is my sense of a self, my sense of an ego personality, hopelessly identified with my mind and my body, um, I experience one kind of life. I have spent all my time trying to make my ego happy, which has been an impossible task. I do what it tells me it wants and needs and avoid what it doesn't want and thinks it doesn't need. And I'm happy for 5 or 10 minutes before it makes its next demand about whatever. And I had to drink just to get away from that um, sense of misery, a deep sense of misery that I carried within. And on the other hand, I believe I have a soul that co-inhabits this human body. The human body has its creators, my parents, or the whole human biology, but my soul has my spiritual creator, which I am comfortable calling God. So I've spent all my life uh, living under the tyranny of my human nature until coming into AA and starting to do this stuff. And there's so many lines in our book that, at least for me, lead me to this. But it's taken me a long time to really understand their import. And I had to go through this long and deep and painful depression um, to get humble enough or desperate enough to ask God to restore me to sanity. And I really understand that I was suffering from the delusion that I was sane. I thought I had, I thought I was sane. I'm sober. I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm working hard. I thought I was sane until this battle, I believe, between my ego and my soul. And this is the funny thing. This comes from A Course in Miracles. The ego is battling. The soul, it's not battling. It's the ego that's doing the battle, um, and trying to anyway. Today, I believe that the ego used this depression to call attention to itself, and I could not avoid it. It had me laying in bed 20 hours a day for a fairly long period. And so, any rate, I feel I have asked God to restore me to sanity, and now I'm trying to improve the extent of that, which means going to God for guidance in everything that I think, say, and do. And what's beautiful about these rules for discernment is they really are an exposition of how the ego works. How it works says, um, some of us tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the results were nil until we let go absolutely. And it talks about alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful. It's not alcohol that's cunning, baffling, and powerful. It's my sense of self. It's the human ego that's cunning, baffling, and powerful. And Ignatius does as good a job as anybody in exposing the blatant unreality of the human ego. And most of us, I've said many times, what my ego wants is self preservation. It wants to preserve its own thinking. It wants to feel good, self gratification, and it wants to justify its selfish, self centered behavior. Um, in order to feel good all the time and live a long and happy life, it tells me. Um, the soul wants and needs none of that stuff. The soul already has lived a good long time. The soul is so deeply connected to God that it does not doubt it. One of our phrases that I am coming to deeply value is deep down in every man, woman, child. This is page 52. I don't think it was part of our opening words. It's on page 51, right before the bedevilments on 52. Deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental nature of God. It may be covered by pomp, calamity, worship of other things, but it is there just as much as the feeling that we have for a friend. It's a incredible statement to me that I've already got this thing within me. I could not be here without it. Um, the problem is that I have obscured it. I have covered it over with pomp, calamity, worship of other things. Pomp means personal pride, my sense of self, that somehow my sense of self, my attention to my sense of self obscures this fundamental nature of God within me. So that's pride, the reverse of humility. Calamity is self-pity. Calamity is when, oh, woe is me. Oh boy, I got some trouble now, and I got to focus on what seems to be wrong in my life as the most important thing that I could do. And then finally, the other killer, worship of other things. My attention to it. It could be sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's, anything that I'm attending to that I think is going to make me feel good or accomplish my ego's wishes. So along comes Ignatius 500 years ago, before we even used the term human ego. And he's talking about talking about fundamental ego-based, ego-based life, and how to get around that so that we can more openly get to God's guidance for our lives. Page 68 says, we are in this world to play the role God assigns, not the role I have assigned me and I've assigned you, because I'm assigning you a role as well. And I want you to play the role that I think. That's where each person is like the actor trying to run the whole show. So then we have these rules for discernment, which are after the spiritual exercises. They're appendix, very much like our spiritual appendix, an add-on. And we have 2 weeks of these things, and we're going to get into the second week today. Where we left off last time was we finished rule 9, which is of the first week, is a really important thing to remember. If you're feeling bad, find first week number 9 and take a look at it. And what it says is, when I'm in desolation, there are 3 reasons why a loving, caring creator, higher power, would permit me to experience desolation. Reason 1, it's my fault. I've let up on my spiritual drill. I'm worshiping other things is essentially what it is. I'm not trying to stay in close conscious contact with my creator. So that's reason number 1. Reason number 2, I'm forgetting. Reason number 3 is it's the only way I'm going to learn humility. The only way that I'm going to learn that I didn't create all this, and my job is humbly relying on my creator. Number 2, I'm going to find here, I hope. Oh yeah. So second is God is testing and strengthening the quality of my spiritual progress, and seeing how far I will go. This is really go to any lengths. Seeing how far I will go to try to attend to the question, God, how can I best serve thee when I'm feeling rotten? When I'm feeling bad, am I still gonna stick to my intention to try to serve God? So we're up to rule number 10, and I'm going to read you two versions of this, and this may be confusing for you. And the first one I'm going to read is from my favorite version of these spiritual exercises, which I've not recommended to you only because I don't want to get in too many books. This one is called The Spiritual Exercises by Michael Givens. I don't know what it is, but he just does a great translation, and he does a lot of add-on notes that help you understand how they come up with these words. And I'll just remind you what I've done here is to try to take these things and put them in my own words. That's the ones that are in the PDF, and I'm going to read that second. So here's first week, Rule 10, Michael Ivens, Ivens. A person in consolation should think how they shall bear themselves in the desolation which will follow later, and gather renewed strength for that moment. So this is one of the pieces of advice that we're given. You may remember that Mark Thibodeau, in God's Voice Within, gave us 8 things to do when we're in desolation, and he gave us 4 things to do when we're in consolation, when we're feeling good. And this is the first one of those. Get ready for the next desolation. When you're feeling good, prepare yourself, because the next bout with the ego is coming. So don't rest on your laurels. Feeling good, get yourself ready for the next desolation that's coming to you. The way I said it in the PDF is Rule 10, when in consolation, we should consider how we should bear ourselves when we are in our next period of desolation, and how we should gather strength for those moments. Okay, so that's not particularly different. Rule number 11. First version. And you're going to, well, persons in consolation should try to humble and lower themselves as much as possible by thinking how little they are worth in times of desolation without this grace of consolation. On the other hand, a person in desolation should keep in mind that they can do much if they draw strength from their Creator and Lord, having the grace sufficient to resist every enemy. So, my version, when in consolation, we should try to humble ourselves as much as possible, considering how useless we are without the grace of God. When in desolation, we should keep in mind that we still have sufficient grace to resist temptation and demonstrate God's peace, love, and way of life. So, what's important here is that how much we need God's grace in our lives, but that when we're feeling bad, the way you hear it in meetings is God will never give me more than I can handle. That's the way we say it. The way Ignatius is saying it is, the promise is, no matter how bad you feel, you already have enough of the grace of God to handle whatever is coming in your direction. So same idea. Here's rule number 12. Oh boy. Yeah. Okay. First week, rule 12. The behavior of the enemy resembles that of a woman in a quarrel with a man, for he is weak when faced with strength, but strong when faced with weakness. Now, he'd never get away with this language today, and you really could just take the man and woman out of it. Just say two people, two people interrelating with each other, either one of them, or in my case, I use spoiled brat instead of the woman. It's my spoiled brat ego, because I believe my ego is a spoiled brat. I've been spending all my life trying to make it happy, and it's just a spoiled brat. It's never enough. At any rate, Behavior of the enemy resembles that of a woman in a quarrel with a man, for he is weak when faced with strength, but strong when faced with weakness. What it really comes down to in the end is you got to be firm with the ego. When the ego starts mouthing off and making you miserable and making its demands, you got to be firm, because if you're not, it will come at you with everything. It is characteristic of a woman when she quarrels with a man to lose heart and take flight when the man shows a bold front. On the other hand, the moment the man gives way and loses courage, then the rage, vengeance, and ferocity of the woman overflows and knows no bounds. Just translate it, because it's not men and women, it's people dealing with each other. In the same way, it's characteristic of the enemy to weaken and lose courage and turn to flight with his temptations when the person engaged in the spiritual life shows a bold front against those temptations and acts in a way diametrically opposed to them. I don't know why, but the language is very stilted and complicated, and it's been a experience for me to try to get it into more understandable language. If, on the contrary, such a person begins to be afraid and lose courage in sustaining temptations, no wild beast on the face of the earth is as ferocious as the enemy of human nature in the surging malice with which he pursues his wicked purpose. So if you just substitute ego, it's just saying when you're dealing with the ego, you gotta be strong and don't let it take off on you. And I believe that one of the elements that the AA Big Book adds to this whole deal is my fundamental problem is my lack of power over my human ego. I can mentally wish for serenity, and I can't make it, manufacture it. I can't go get it. Serenity is an expression of the grace of God, and I get it from God, not from anything that my human ego can do. And this is just saying when you're dealing with the ego or a spoiled brat, I rather than thinking man and woman, I like to think of a little spoiled brat and the parent. That, if you're firm with it and you just let it yell and scream and throw its tantrum, it'll exhaust itself and stop. If you get involved and you're not showing a strong front, it goes crazy. It goes crazy in what it tries to do. All right, the rule number 13. Oh yeah. So number 13 is about the false lover, and essentially what he's saying about the enemy. Now I'm saying the enemy means human nature. Human nature behaves as a false lover behaves toward a woman. Such a man wants to remain hidden and not be discovered, using dishonest talk to try to seduce the daughter of a good father or the wife of a good husband. He wants his words and inducements kept secret. So that's one of the tip-offs of the ego and desolation. It operates in secret. It does not operate in the open. In using dishonest talk to try to seduce the daughter of a good father or the wife of a good husband, he wants his words and inducements kept secret. On the other hand, when the daughter reveals his smooth words and corrupt intentions to her father, or the wife to her husband, he is very much put out. He, the ego, the false lover, very much put out, for then he easily recognizes that his plans are not going to succeed. In the same way, the ego brings his deceits and inducements to bear on the just soul. He wants them received and kept in secret. When they are revealed to a good confessor or some other person who knows the ego's trickery and perversity, he's very displeased, realizing that once his tricks are revealed, his malicious purposes cannot succeed. All it's doing is telling you this is how the human ego behaves. I'm sorry that there's such complicated words. For 14th rule, last one of the first week. Likewise, I'm saying the human ego, behaves like a military leader setting about the conquest and seizure of the object he desires. The commander of an army setting up his camp, inspecting the fortifications and defend defenses of a fortress, attacks at its weakest point. In the same way, the enemy of our human nature, now for me, that's the ego, as opposed to my spiritual nature, makes his rounds, inspects all our virtues, theological, cardinal, and moral, and where he finds us weakest and in greatest need as regards our internal salvation, there he attacks and tries to take us. I'll say again, when we're in consolation, that's when we look back and we see where am I vulnerable? Where am I weakest in terms of my relationship with God? Where am I most under the ego's influence? The ego attacks us at our weakest point. So it really could lead to some outstanding self-examination if we wanted to do that, to look at, my ego. No, you heard the one about why is it that our family is so good at pushing our buttons? And the answer is because they installed them. That's where we and it's not, I mean, my ego installs my buttons. It's in combination with my family, but we all have our points. I guess it's where we lack power the most, or where we're going to our character defects trying to get power, because we have this sense that that will somehow bring us solution. So, at any rate, this is you could say that my ego is going to attack my relationship with God at its weakest point. Where I am weakest in my relationship with God, that's where the ego is going to go. What we say in AA actually is pink and green. I'm willing to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand God, unless it's pink or green. And pink means romance and green means finance. I'm going to you, God, but not when it comes to interpersonal relationships and the romance side of things. You couldn't possibly know what I want and need there. I'm in charge of that, and I'm in charge of my finance. I can't trust you with my money. I can't, in this standpoint, you would say those are our weakest points. All right, that's the end of the first week. We're going on to the second week, and so uh, um, this book I'm reading makes a big difference between the first week and the second week. I all I think is that the second week is a little bit more in depth than the first week, and it's we're further along the spiritual path when we get to this second week. So let's see where we start. Okay, I'm just going to go right to the first rule. So this is second week, rule one, and again, I'm sorry. I wish they were just, what are there, 14 in the first week, 8 in the second week. So there are 22 of these things. I'm sorry they're not just numbered that way. So you don't have to. We wouldn't have two number ones. Okay. Um, Second week, first rule. It is characteristic of God and his angels in the movements prompted by them to give true gladness and spiritual joy while banishing all sadness and distress brought on by the enemy, brought on by the human ego, whose characteristic is to fight against this joy and spiritual consolation by bringing forward specious arguments, subtleties, and one fallacy after another. This is cunning, baffling, and powerful. What he's saying, which is something I absolutely feel, is the ego does not want me to succeed in my relationship with God. The promise is that my relationship with God will bring me serenity. And my ego does not want me living in serenity. It wants me living under its tyranny. The ego will fight against this joy and spiritual consolation. And it does it with all sorts of cunning, baffling, and powerful arguments. You wind up not being able to explain it. Why does the ego do this? I don't know. Okay, I believe the ego is fighting for control, and that's what I have to give up and live, not try to justify my sense of self, but to try to live as a trusted servant of my Creator. And this is the big thing. What this eventually, I believe, gets us down to is this a fundamental question. Do I think I created myself? Because depending on how you're going to answer that, you're going to have a different view of your life. If I created myself, I can do what I want. If I didn't create myself, if I am a created being, don't you think that means I've got the obligation to ask the challenging question, why am I here? What do you want me to do? And where I've already quoted the line on 68, we are in this world to play the role God assigns. Do I believe that? Am I here trying to play the role I've been assigned, or am I here trying to self-design my own life without any interaction with higher power? So, rule number 2. Oh, yeah. Okay. Um, so the other thing that happens in the second week, in the first week, we defined fundamental desolation and consolation. Consolation in sync with God's purpose for my life, and I know I'm in sync because I feel good. I feel faith and hope and love. Desolation out of sync with God's purpose for my life, and I know that because I feel doubt and fear and despair. This has been huge for me because I have sought serenity. I have wanted to experience serenity, inner peace, all these good feelings, spiritual joy, all that stuff. That's been the goal. And this stuff comes along and says, no, no, no. It's not the goal, it's the result. If you seek to improve your relationship with God, in whatever way that means to you, you will experience faith and hope and love as a byproduct, as a result, not as a goal. And the other side, when you're not doing that, you're going to experience doubt and fear and despair. So desolation, consolation. Now what we're going to add are 3 more states. Just to jump ahead, there is desolation, and there is something called false consolation, which is actually desolation. It's where we feel good, but it's really coming from the ego. It's ego-based feeling good, not God-based feeling good. So desolation and false consolation. Then we got consolation, number 1. Number 2 is consolation without previous cause, and that's what I'm about to talk about. Second week, second rule. Consolation without previous cause is what we call a God shot, where I have an experience of God beyond my ability to doubt. There's no analyzing of it. There's no nothing. That's what consolation without previous cause is. It's our awareness of God unmistakably. So consolation without previous cause, and then finally difficult consolation, which is where we are learning and growing through painful experiences, and it does not feel good. But we have a deep sense of faith and what was the other one? Faith and hope and love. We don't fear it. We don't resist it. Second week, second rule: only God our Lord can give consolation to the soul without previous cause. For it is the Creator's prerogative to enter the soul and leave her. This is interesting because they always do soul in the female, where the body, the ego is the male. At any rate, is the Creator's prerogative to enter the soul and leave her, and to arouse movements which draw her entirely into the love of His divine majesty. When I say without cause, I mean without any previous perception or understanding of some object due to which such consolation could come about through the mediation of the person's own acts of understanding and will. That's why I'm saying we call it a God shot. This is not the result of me praying and meditating and being of service and living in relationship with God, where I could say, if I'm feeling good, if I'm feeling faith, hope, and love, it's because I'm doing my drill. That's me establishing conditions under which I can feel God's grace and love. Consolation without previous cause, I have nothing to do with it. It doesn't come after anything that I've done on a spiritual basis to earn that. I'm going to read you my version. It's 330. Only God can give consolation without previous cause to the soul, for it is the Creator's prerogative to enter and leave the soul, and to arouse movements within that draw the soul entirely into the wholehearted and divine love of God. I have a personal hope. This is being restored to sanity. When I say without cause, I mean without any previous perception or understanding of something which could come about through our own acts of understanding and will through prayer and meditation. We call it a God shot, an experience of God beyond our ability to doubt, and we know we had nothing to do with it. We didn't cause it, that it is the grace of God. Okay. On to second week. Number 3, distinction between without cause and with cause. Third rule: when there is a cause, consolation can be given by the good angel or the bad angel, but these give consolation for opposite purposes. The good angel for the soul's profit, so that the person grows and rises from good to better. The bad angel for the contrary purpose, so as eventually to draw the person into his own evil intention and wickedness. This is where I feel I do believe in angels, no question. But I understand this much better if I distinguish between body, mind, and spirit. My body mind is my human nature. My human nature is identified with my body and mind, and my soul, which for me is the good angel, the good intuitive thought and feeling, the part of me that is directly connected to God, as opposed to my human nature. And it makes all the difference for me when reading this. So when there is cause, consolation can come from so when I'm feeling good, this could come from my soul, or it could come from my ego. This is false consolation. I feel good, but it's coming from my ego. It's not coming from my spiritual nature. Um, so rule number 4, second week, number 4. It is characteristic of the bad angel to assume the form of an angel of light in order to enter the devoted soul by her own way and leave with his own profit. I love that. That is to say, he proposes good and holy thoughts well adapted to such a just soul, and then succeeds little by little in getting his own way, drawing the soul into his hidden snares and perverted purposes. So the false angel of light. This is another form. This is false consolation. Um, it suddenly the thought crosses my mind that if I put whiskey into milk and drink it on a full stomach, I'm going to be okay. That's a false angel of light. If I get a new relationship, a new romantic relationship, and I get the opportunity to feel love and affection, everything is going to be all right. If I win the lottery, that's probably the one that so many of us are, if I win the lottery and I get $1 billion, all will be well. Everything will be okay. So, so this again is a form of false consolation. And what they're going to ask us to do in the next one is to watch how the ego starts off with good thoughts, and then slowly and subtly and takes us down the rabbit hole, winds up getting us in the position it wants us to be in. Oh, that's what this says. This is second week, number 5. Um, I'm pushing through this because as soon as we get done with this stuff, then when we meet again, we're going to take these rules and go back to God's voice within and talk about how to specifically and practically apply these things to our decision-making process. 5th rule, we must pay close attention to the whole course of thought. If the beginning, middle, and end are entirely good and tend toward what is wholly right, this is a sign of the good angel. This is the soul talking. But if the course of thought suggested to it leads us finally to something bad or distracting or less good than what one had previously intended to do, or if in the end the soul is weakened, upset, or distressed, losing the peace, tranquility, and quiet previously experienced, all this is a clear sign of the bad spirit, the enemy of our progress and eternal well-being. So, again, I believe this second week he's really talking about the subtleties and the danger and risks of believing your own thinking. When step 11 says on awakening, as we're thinking about the day in front of us, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that our thinking be divorced from self-pity, self-delusion, self-seeking. And then it says, under these conditions, we can trust our thinking. When we've asked that it be divorced from self-pity, self-delusion, self-seeking. Well, I believe this is self-pity is when it says our spiritual nature in all of us is obscured by pomp, calamity, worship of other things. That relates to these things, to self-pity, self-delusion, self-seeking. Self-seeking is worship of other things. Self-pity is the calamity, and self-pity, self-delusion, dishonesty is when I'm when I have a sense of personal pride. I can do this. I don't need God. Second week, rule number 6, when the enemy of human nature has been detected, when the ego's wishes have been detected and recognized by his serpent's tail. This is what I love. So it wants you to follow the serpent's tail as it takes you down the rabbit hole. You start off with a good thought, and it slowly works you into its own. And the evil end to which he leads, it profits the person who has been tempted by him, the ego, to retrace immediately the whole sequence of good thoughts he has suggested, looking for their starting point and noting how the enemy contrived little by little to make the soul fall away from the state of sweetness and spiritual joy she was in until he drew her into his own depraved intention. By recognizing and taking note of this experience, one is put on one's guard for a future against his habitual deceits. So it's really complicated. I mean, it's hard language, but essentially, and I can tell you, um, the four things when we're feeling okay, when we're feeling good, the four things are one of the four things is to look back on the last period of desolation and see if you can see how you got dragged down there. And I've been doing this for a while now, and I am believing that the start of it, of my depression, um, was when I was asked to speak at a national conference. Uh, I did an okay job, and then I heard the Saturday night speaker, and I could tell he had something I didn't have. What he had was a deeper relationship with God. Um, and he wasn't talking from, I was more theoretical, I think. And I was really, and it doesn't matter, but that was the start of it. And I believe that I was taken into this depression in order that I would finally, desperately and humbly ask to be restored to sanity. And it's made a huge difference to me in the whole deal in the steps, is that I see more clearly, at least for me, that steps 4 and 5 are my admission of insanity. Step 6 and 7 is me asking God to restore me to sanity vis-a-vis however it is useful to God and to my fellows, not to how I feel about myself. That's the beauty, I believe, of the 7-step prayer. I pray that you now restore me to sanity only as it aids my usefulness to you and to my fellows. God may leave me insane in certain ways if there's some usefulness to my insanity. I can't imagine what that would be, but that's what it says. So so okay, I'm hustling because I want to get through these, and I got a couple more minutes. Seventh rule. Okay, this gets a little complicated, so hear me out, and then I'll try to make it make sense. For those who are going from good to better, this means we're progressing spiritually. The good angel touches the soul gently, lightly, sweetly, like a drop of water falling on a sponge. Where the bad spirit touches her sharply with noise and disturbance, as when a drop of water falls on a stone. So if I'm progressing, God comes to me gently and sweetly, and the ego comes to me with harshness. Um, with those who are going from bad to worse, this is where I'm regressing. I'm going into desolation. Um, the same spirits touch the soul in the opposite way. For the reason for this difference is that the disposition of the soul of persons touched is either contrary or similar to the angels. When it's contrary, the spirits enter with noise and disturbance, making their presence felt. When disposition is similar, they come in quietly as one would enter one's own house by an open door. It's taken me a long time to try to get this, and I believe what it's saying is, um, when I'm in debt, when I'm being drawn into desolation, my ego will be gentle and sweet and alluring, where my soul is going to give me pricks of conscience, is what it's called somewhere. I'm going to be stabbed a little bit. When I'm drawn into consolation, it's going to be, God's presence will be gentle and sweet and light, and the ego is the one that's going to make a fuss and kick up a ruckus. And why I'm saying that these things are um, such an exposition of the human ego and how to deal with it. Eighth rule: when consolation is without cause, even though there's no deception in it, since, as has been said, it comes solely from God our Lord, Nevertheless, the spiritual person to whom God gives this consolation must scrutinize the experience carefully and attentively so as to distinguish the precise time of the actual consolation from the period following it, during which the soul is still aglow and favored with the benefits and after effects of the consolation now past. I know this is complicated and wordy. For during this second period, it often happens that owing either to thinking based on conclusions drawn from the relations between our own concepts and judgments or to the agency of the good or bad spirits, we form various plans and opinions which are not given directly by God our Lord. These require, therefore, to be examined with very great care before being given complete credence and put into practice. A complicated way of saying this is a manic state, I believe, that we experience consolation. We're feeling really good. Our ego hops on it and starts getting over enthused about certain things that it says we're going to do, and it's coming from ego. It's this is again that would be false consolation, and I think he describes a manic state. So we got through it. I'm gonna stop this recording, and we're gonna have some open discussion. But now the idea is we're gonna go back to taking these rules and applying them practically to our um, stop. Let's see. Ooh. Oh, there it is. Okay, bye.